Good evening, everybody. I count very much on your unity for this talk. It's not the easiest of talks. When I first started doing it, I thought, golly, this is just too difficult. But anyway, we've got there now, and it's really very interesting because it's all about how do we create unity. So anyway, I'll start off, and it's the title being Networks and Social Relations when the quality of connections counts. And then centrally, and one might add, to generate and strengthen the presence of the living, risen Jesus in our communities. So before we start, I would like to acknowledge Lisha Paglioni. She's the one who wrote this talk. And I've chopped it down an awful lot, so apologies to Lisha because it's been reduced somewhat. The theme that we are deepening this year, Jesus Alive, Present in the Communities. This talk looks specifically at social networks. So the concept of social network has become, in our modern age, an increasingly complex type of being and living that puts into question how we can build a harmonious and collaborative living together. And so we need to look at how to create the conditions for Jesus to express himself in our relationships, and so give life to the reality of unity. Network as a theoretical and analytical perspective from which to look at relationships. The concept of social network has the following components: a set of nodes, which are individuals or collective realities, such as families, businesses, cities, schools, etc. And secondly, the relationships linking these different nodes. This perspective leads us to look at the social context in which we live every day, as a result of an interweaving of relationships between people who are linked for different reasons. For example, work, neighborhood, leisure, time together. We can perceive that there are many invisible threads that tie in different ways the lives of many people. In this perspective, every social reality can be seen as the result of interwoven relationships, and at the same time as the node of a larger network. With this in mind, it may be interesting to reflect on the fact that, sociologically, the reality of Jesus living in a community could be understood as a particular relational configuration. We all know that it's specific to us, that, it's specific to Christians to have Jesus amongst them. This configuration can have various degrees, the highest of which we could call unity. So this network does not only reflect quantity of relations, but also quality of relationships. Okay, so which kinds of networks do we need to achieve unity? Quantitatively, we all experience that we are easily connected with more and more people. We realize this by thinking about social media like Facebook, where we can easily increase the number of our friends. Some people I know have got 1,000 friends. It's just quite an interesting fact. Anyway, the fact that the size of our network is growing does not necessarily mean that our relationships express more the reality of unity. For this to happen, we need a certain quality of these connections, of these links that make up the networks in which we are inserted. And in this sense, the sociological perspective of the networks offers some suggestions. For example, we notice that the quality of the relationships depends on the motivation that nourish them, that push us to enter or make us continue to build a relationship. These motivations can be linked to, firstly, a personal interest. You want to connect because you like the person. Sometimes, not always, very hopefully very rarely, the drive of showing one's superiority, and then thirdly, the desire to love the other. Through the gift of oneself, if we find the same intention in the other, what is born between us is a bond, defined by sociologists as specifically human. In this bond, both I and the other lose something of ourselves, but in reality we find ourselves building a new common reality which belongs to us and to which we belong. At the same time, however, we also find ourselves to be more ourselves. And we know the great gift that Chiara has given us, that is, just as the spirituality of unity also suggests, by giving ourselves to each other, by realizing mutual love through the gift of ourselves, a reality is created that transcends us. It contains and surpasses us, but does not annul us. On the contrary, it is a reality that we could call unity, a relationship that, one would say in the language of the spirituality of unity, bears within itself a Trinitarian imprint. Perhaps you remember what Chiara said. Chiara said, I felt that I was created as a gift to those close to me, and those close to me were created as a gift for me. Just as the Father in the Trinity is everything to the Son, and the Son is everything to the Father. So the quality of the relationships then depends on the type of motivation and also on the consistency that may exist between them. If we imagine these relationships as pipes, then help, friendship, information, etc. can pass through them. More than one content can be there simultaneously, defining what in the network language is called multiplicity, generally believed to be an expression of the strength of the bond. I've actually made an experience of this multiplicity. I've always had a lot to do with Word of Life groups, and there's a particular Word of Life group at the moment that, as a result of this multiplicity, or what I've understood multiplicity to be, it's a very strong relationship exists within this Word of Life group. And I would say probably the multiplicity is that each person in that group has had a long life experience. In other words, it's a group of older people. So this multiplicity, let's say, there's a lot of input into the group, although it's not apparent, but I know, and from the experience that I've had with this group, you really feel that there is a multiplicity of input because of their lifelong experience, because they're all older people. So it says the more contact passes through the same relationships, that is, it is multiple, the more this relation is considered to be strong. This can be understood by thinking, for example, that with a person you can have a relationship where you only help that person, or you can have a relationship of help and of friendship, and at the same time. In the first case, only the help is the content that binds. If, therefore, the help relationship with a person is interrupted, the bond is broken. So obviously there's not multiplicity there. In the second case, when it is also friendship, even if the helping relationship is broken, the bond holds. In this second case, the bond is therefore stronger. So multiplicity, however, can also be a measure of fragility. Well, we all know that. I mean, we all know that the relationship we have, those of us who are in Popolare, those of us who are married, or anybody we have relationships, there's always a complexity in relationships. And because we're not perfect people, there's always some kind of, there could be other, let's say, not quite so positive things that enter into the relationship. So there's this multiplicity, this contrasting something in the relationship. But we all know, and this is, we've learned so much from Chiara, and she said, when you feel that there's something wrong, use that wrongness as a springboard so that you can make the relationship better. So even though there are these contradictions, if love is the central motivation, then we can we can overcome anything. So that, or we could say that perhaps according to the inspiration present in the spirituality of unity, that any contradiction regarding the contents of the links should not diminish the predominance of the motivational content love. If love is the dominant motivation, any other contradiction can be transformed into an opportunity for further maturation of ourselves and of the relationship, thus turning it into a springboard to greater fullness. 3 other qualities that tell us about the strength of relationships according to the network approach are frequency, duration, and intensity. Frequency indicates how often the relationships are activated, while duration tells us how long they exist, and intensity indicates the importance. From a network perspective, relationships are generally considered to be stronger. If they combine these 3 features, therefore, a high frequency of contacts, a long duration, and much meaning for those who live them, would result in a very strong relationship. However, it can also happen that a different proportion of the 3 features, for example, a low frequency over a period of time and a very large meaning, give the same result in terms of strength. Since we want to reflect on a relational configuration that is an expression of Jesus in social life, perhaps these 3 elements can help us. We know well that relationships are not always eye to eye. Those that express unity, more or less realized, are activated more or less frequently, so much so that Chiara herself emphasized that you can't put Jesus in the midst once and for all. In general, this can be linked to the duration of relationships and the energy spent in each relationship, how much we value it and consume ourselves in it. That is, to love each other as Jesus loved us. Then we also know that unity is a gift. It doesn't depend only on us to generate it, but it requires a certain disposition. So we have seen that relationships can be one directional, unidirectional, or mutual. But a clarification is necessary. One directional, unidirectional connections may be relationships of power, dependence, exploitation, but also of help, whereas reciprocity is typical of connections between peers. Depending on the content, reciprocity may or may not be a manifestation of Jesus' presence among those involved. Reciprocity, in fact, could have as its content envy, anger, gossip, etc. Then it would not be the kind of relationship that we could consider an expression of unity. But if it has love as its content, it opens the possibility of allowing Jesus to enter into social life, as Chiara suggests. Before everything else, continuous mutual charity. Right in the beginning of the first talk, we talked about the little ones, the weak ones. This is what required to save every relationship, this constant, continual charity. We also experience that charity can lead to the beginning of relationships of love, even if love is initially one-sided. Even where reciprocity is lacking, if a relationship, even a one-directional one, is filled with love, it does not become an expression of power or of control, but rather a free invitation to the other to enter into the dynamic of mutual love. We can only do our part. If the others do not make themselves one with us in truth, Let us make ourselves one with them in charity, but let us maintain the connection. The hour will come when, if God wants, the bond that unites us to our brother or sister will be Christ Himself, Christ in our midst. This aspect, that is, Jesus in the midst, recalls another concept of network theory, which allows us to imagine not only two-way reciprocity, but a relationship open to third parties. I really like this. This is called transitivity, and I think that transitivity is very particular to Christianity. In other words, the idea is that if you've got a wonderful relationship with somebody else and there's Jesus amongst you, then you are also prepared to share it with other people. You're happy to bring other people into that relationship. So that is the concept of transitivity. So we are saying that transitivity describes the possibility of a greater love, which goes beyond the two initial nodes of Jesus in the midst, going out towards everyone. Thus, Jesus living among the two becomes contagious, open to third parties, including more and more other nodes or people in that reality. Okay, we've got a diagram here. And this diagram, it looks too perfect. But anyway, the idea is, and I've made an experience with a group of people in Wellington where there's a soup kitchen, and they started off with one person taking food to clients, and so this little red dot would be the person going out towards the other of help. And then other volunteers came in and they were giving out food and stuff. But then also what happened in that second one is that not only the volunteers, but also some of the people who were receiving the food started to have a relationship with the volunteers. And then thirdly, when it goes even better than that, is that there's a relationship between the volunteers amongst themselves, between the clients and the clients with the volunteers. And if that happens, then you have a complete breakdown of, let's say, the hierarchical aspect of relationships. And I mean, obviously, that's the way we want the world to be, where there's no longer this hierarchical idea, but that there's this flow of life amongst us, which is this presence of Jesus amongst us. And then there's this third diagram, and this third diagram, as you see, the caption is that it's a reflection of what the Popolare is. And so there can in fact be networks in which some nodes and links are particularly powerful because they are placed in strategic positions with respect to decisions, information passages, and therefore they are fundamental for the quality of the unity of the network itself. And then to sum up, we can see the sociological reality of Jesus living in communities as a relational configuration with different strengths, which arrive at the maximum that we call unity. This unity has a non-hierarchical, cohesive form, always mutual and always open to others, animated by the motivation of constant and mutual love. And so in the different social contexts in which we are immersed, from our family to our places of work and study, to our city, to our world, we can become living realities of unity. If the bonds that compose them will have these characteristics, and above all, if they are lit by this motivation of love, these relationships will become life-giving, contagious fires everywhere in the world. Thank you, everybody.
In the middle of a mixed up world, feeling like we're going round in circles. Empty promises and empty words leave us hungering for something real. Must be a way to rise above the noise. Things will never change if we stay silent. We can find a way to fill the void, build the world of peace we want to see. Now is the time to let the truth come out. What we need is a voice. Together we can be a blast of sound if we stand by our choice. Turn it up, turn it up. We're gonna stand up for what we believe in. Turn it up, turn it up. It's time to wake up and fight for our dreams. Turn it up, turn it up. We'll never give up. Our hope has a reason. Turn it up, turn it up. Turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, 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 up. People put up their invisible walls, keeping out the others from their circles. The more the barrier is strong and tall, the more they build a prison for themselves. But there's a way to burn the barriers down. All it takes is a spark. We'll see the fire spreading all around, making way through the dark. Turn it up, turn it up. We're gonna stand up for what we believe in. Turn it up, turn it up. It's time to wake up and fight for our dreams. Turn it up, turn it up. We'll never give up. Our hope has a reason. Turn it up, turn it up. Turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, 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 up. We will rise above all the noise, above the confusion. We will speak, we'll lift up our voice and make a difference. We will shine, we'll burn like a flame, the lights of the darkness. We will stand together as one, we'll sing. Turn it up, turn it up. We're gonna stand up for what we believe in. Turn it up, turn it up. It's time to wake up and fight for our dreams. Turn it up, turn it up. We'll never give up. Our hope has a reason. Turn it up, turn it up. Turn it up, turn it up, turn it up, 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 up. Turn it up.
So, hi, good evening. I'm Bingo, and as my wife Antoinette, we're actually from Wellington in New Zealand, and is about unity. So, um, at work, the kind of work that I do, I'm not really a like a permanent employee. I'm a sort of a consultant, so I jump from one place to the other. And for me, it's very important that when I enter a new place, that that you that I try to make friends with people and not just have a common interest. So therefore, each day, like most of us, I'm sure, we start the day by praying if we are able to, and asking for the guidance from from God, asking to for Holy Spirit so that we would be guided, especially in very difficult situations. And there were a good number of instances wherein I would be deep in my sleep at night, and sometimes I just get awakened from my sleep in the early hours of the morning, normally between 3 and 5 a.m. And there were times that I thought that I was already aging, I was growing old. That's why I have a very short number of hours of sleep. But then normally what happens is they try to ignore my, these waking up hours and just try to sleep again. And then what I realized is that the following night it would still be the same experience, and then I ignore it again. And the third night, it would still be again the same experience, and this would just keep on going until. And then in one of these experiences, I recall how Samuel was called. And so in one of these things, wherein after 1 week of sleepless nights, I finally said, "Lord, what do you want me? What are you trying to tell me something?" So I ended up praying, and it is in these occasions that I get step-by-step instructions on what to do, because of course at work at times when there's a problem in terms of the system, like there's no agreement, it creates so much disunity and so much pressure because time is running. You need to deliver solution to the system. The team should be able to, and that's when tension starts to flare up. And I still try to build unity by trying to be patient, not jump on the negative, because everybody is talking about negative things. I try to be the other side, try to influence positively, trying to remember everything that I've heard and learned from Popolare so far in my short time with Popolare. And of course, while praying, as I said, at night I get these inspirations. I get waken up from my sleep, and what really blows me away is that the solutions that are to me, I would not say are my own. It's not my own. It's all because I never thought of them, and no one thought of them, and it's just a step-by-step instructions, which is really, really very amazing, because it just blows me away. And then the following day when I go back to work, I try to share that, and I'm just also blown away by the acceptance of the instructions. And the humbling part of this is that I cannot claim that it's my solution, that I thought of it, although the temptation is there sometimes, of course. We're only human, but I just tell them, no, I can't tell them that it's God. I got this inspiration from my sleep, otherwise I lose my work. Actually, in one of my interviews I went before, I said, we should love and we should care for each other, and I didn't get the job. I think they were quite scared that we have a candidate for harassment. So I didn't get that role because I was talking to them about we should care about our product owners, we should care about the developer, the testers. But that's the beauty of this about unity, because with the work I'm doing, I'm trying to make sure that the developers have all they need so they don't get stressed out. I think of others, I think of testers, and in return, they also help me out I think that's just by nature, because I try to make their life easy. When I approach them, especially developers can be very cranky. I mean, IT developers, they can be cranky if they're in the middle of coming up with a code and then you ask them. Sometimes they snap at you, but because there's that reciprocity, there's that, they know that I care for them. When I ask them, and I ask them politely as well, do you have a few minutes? They would normally answer and, accommodate me as well, no matter how busy they are. So yeah, that's just my way of trying to build unity in the workplace. And yeah, it's how it comes together. And in fact, I just returned to this workplace that I am in now. So I was away from here for a year. And before I left, we would normally have ice cream time. We call it ice cream time. So at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., they would look at me and say, is it ice cream time already? And then, there'd be around 11 of us going to the dairy. So the other day, it was again very pressured, and I just blurted out, who wants ice cream? And I was expecting a no, because of course I'm watching my sugar now, and I got a yes. So I said, I was expecting a no. So everybody was so happy to get up from their seat, to get away from the screens and just go down to the dairy just across the road, buy some ice cream, and came back. And was very good. It's sort of break the tension a bit, and everybody just came back working happy. And I just thank God for that. I mean, these things you don't notice, but I think because, you know, of all the teachings we've been hearing, we sort of get that. So yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll have to read mine because my memory's not like it used to be. This is really about groups that I started, always with the prompting of the Holy Spirit first. Ian asked me to share on the groups that I have run and what motivates me. My name is Annette Corbin. I live in Paraparaumu in New Zealand. I am now a widow with 5 adult children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I was the 3rd child in a Catholic family of 5. We were raised by our beautiful dad after our mother was killed in a road accident. He carried us through our childhood years with his very strong faith, wisdom and love. This formed the stability in our lives. As an adult, having learned empathy and compassion from loss in my life, I could sense the people who were hurting. I had often shared their experiences. The main motivation and points of forming each group were, there were always promptings from the Holy Spirit first. 1, having a strong relationship with some of the people, later developing a strong relationship with each person who came. 2, they needed to feel accepted and loved for who they were, to know we wouldn't judge them. They then trusted us. 4, we asked them what their needs were in their particular group situation. We then started a group with their consent. 6, we all belonged to the Abrahamic faith. Some were on the fringes of the church and society. We felt very humbled to sit back and watch God at work. As younger people, about your ages, we joined the Catholic Charismatic prayer group. It came in about the 80s, I think. From this group, a community was born. We became a working community, running camps for children and conferences for adults. I didn't start these 2 groups, but felt privileged to belong. I'll just say a little bit about the community because it was living very closely with other people. Our first adventure was living in community with 3 other families in buildings owned by our local nuns. There were 3 other families who came to help us on weekends, who lived in their own houses. After some months, we started to have problems with each other's personalities. We came face to face with our own strengths and failings and those within the group. The nuns were amazing. Once we explained our difficulties, they taught us an exceptional tool to deal with it, looking at the strengths of each other and the shadow side of each. Once we understood where each other were coming from, it made us far more understanding and caring. And it was called the Enneagram. Some of you may have come across it. It has been such a good tool for all my life that I'm now going to teach it to my married children and their husbands. I said, that's the only gift I can leave you. I don't have a lot of money. Our children loved living in community. They had the benefit of the gifts of 3 sets of parents. They loved having 5 children to play with. There were many, many wonderful experiences. That was nearly 40 years ago, and they still talk about it from time to time. Going back a bit, once they were teenagers, their needs changed, and we went back to our own family home. As a result, the relationship we had with these people, including difficulties, was what is referred to in this talk as properly human. Is that the word, Ian? There is an amazing bond between us today. With the help of Jesus, we are able to walk together to be fully alive in the joys and sorrows of our lives. When any of us experience the death of a spouse or child, the others would travel through the night to be with us, so to speak. The next group was the teenage group, once we got back home again. One day I felt prompted by the Holy Spirit to ask the teens if they would like to get together once a week for a chat and supper. The topic was love of God and love of others. This group was formed with our teenage children and many others from the different Christian denominations who lived in our street. And it really wasn't difficult because they were all friends anyway. It helped the teenagers talk through some of their difficulties. Plus, there was a lot of laughter and camaraderie. One or two of them later became pastors of other Christian churches. I'm sure it was their praying grandmothers. It wasn't anything to do with me. Another of those teenagers, a young man who was a lovable rogue, who appeared to never take in any of the spiritual content of the group and was a pot smoker, has come back to me since to ask my assistance to have his dying baby baptised, and on another occasion brought his two sons to meet me, a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old. Jesus worked in these young people. They are all very loving people today. Excuse me a minute while I have a drink. The next group, well, I belong to many various groups, but the next one I was asked to take on was the bereavement group. 7 years ago, I was asked to be the coordinator of the bereavement team in our church. Once again, we asked many of our friends who were also widowed how we could best help them. They said Sunday was the loneliest day of the week. We suggested they join my brother and his wife and myself, you'll know who my brother is, David Fromott and Vanya, at a local cafe after Mass each Sunday. God once again blessed all of us. To sit at the table is to share in a non-judgmental environment of faith, support, joy, chatter, laughter and sharing. A beautiful mosaic of shared strengths and experiences with sometimes up to 30 people present. The poor cafe owner, he keeps having to get new tables for us. They are so supportive of each other. There are often suggestions of prayer for others, learning to dance, encouragement to step out after loss and do things. Now I come to the Popolare. I had experienced members of the Popolare community when my brother and his wife were nursing their little grandson, dying from cancer. Members of the Popolare were supporting them in whichever hospital they were transferred to within New Zealand. Now, I kept thinking, uh-oh, my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me? I kept thinking, these people have a special gift. They love one another. You would know they were Christians by their love. Perhaps the rest of us are missing that vital ingredient. I joined Popolare through my brother and sister-in-law. It is a truly beautiful experience. When asked to host a group at Kapiti, we asked the people from our coffee group if they were also interested. 7 of them wanted to join. We are generally of a similar age, quite young really, mid-60s, 70s and 80s, with many different life experiences. One person said she had never felt so loved since her husband died. Now that's a biggie. Another said she was gaining so much spiritually, and others were growing in self-confidence. I feel that I am coming home. These beautiful people will accompany me there. Sorry. Thank you, Lord, for accompanying us. We note that without realising it, most of the groups have been ecumenical. Who knows where you will take us next, Lord? Thank you.
In Australia, I worked as a surveyor, teacher, activities coordinator and an allied health assistant in hospitals. Here in New Zealand for the past year and a half, I've been working as a driver for Meals on Wheels service in Wellington. Here, in contrast to Australia, I find the roads are narrower, more curved and hillier. And at times, one can encounter a double-decker bus coming towards you. A bit scary at first, for the first few times. I enjoy the job, not much paperwork, and it's in the outdoors. The views of the bay and surrounding green hills are stunning. Mind you, Wellington is a bit
windy. It's a rewarding role. I get to meet a lot of people in varying situations who require the service, and most are very appreciative of the service that is provided. Most recipients of the meals are single elderly people who are homebound, living in their own home or government housing. The service is an important source of sustenance and important socially for those who are isolated. The deliveries are on weekdays, arriving midday, consisting of a cooked meal plus a dessert. There are no deliveries on weekends and public holidays, but extra meals can be ordered. To qualify for the service, one has to be referred by a doctor, social worker, or nurse. Meals are subsidised by the government. The cost for the recipient is $4 a meal. All meals are cooked at the hospital kitchen. On average, is about 150 meals daily. My job is to pack and organise the food and then deliver it in chili bins, they say here, but it's eskies over there in Australia, to various community centres in the surrounding suburbs, from where the volunteers pick up and then deliver the meals. I also have runs to deliver personally. The volunteers are an essential part of the service. Many of them have been doing their rounds for many years. The vast majority of the volunteers are in the plus 70 category, and they hardly ever miss a turn. Our run is done usually once a week and takes about an hour. With the outbreak of the COVID virus, this meant that most of our regular team, because of their age, had to step down for the interim and be replaced by those recruited by the social media campaign. They were mostly made up of people who were not working because of the lockdown, and some were the stay-home people who wanted to answer the call and step up and give us a hand. The feedback we got was they were enjoying what they were doing. Now, being part of the Popolare culture, for me, has taught me to take the initiative and ask myself what else I could do to make things better for others. So during COVID period, I tried to do a little bit extra by supporting those who really needed it. Like there was this husband living at home who had just lost his wife of 60 years. I would drop in on the days that I wasn't delivering to him just to check how he was and spend a little bit of time with him. Likewise, I have dropped in on another few of those more isolated, checking on how they were coping and to show them that we do care. Often it might be an offer of a simple smile or exchange of a few words. At times, they might ask for help to change a light globe, move some furniture, take the rubbish out, or just to sit and watch a little bit of TV with them. I've noticed that if they had a DVD player, I would find a chance to drop a video off that they liked. Some had VHS players, which I didn't have any tapes to give them. There is a gentleman in his 90s who is totally deaf. I made the time to sit down with him and have a cup of tea together with hardly any words being exchanged between us. I could see how grateful he was in seeing me, because how his eyes lit up each time I came around. I also realised that their pets are an important companion. I've met Coco, the cat that loves lounging on the sofa, and a cat called Horse who loves sleeping behind the heater. I've become friends with tiny dogs which run around in circles around me thinking that I'm bringing the food for them. We're more than drivers delivering food, we're friends.
Okay, so now we come to the breakout groups. There's a quote from Pope Francis, and it goes like this. It's a little bit small, I'll have to... Anyway, so the quote from Gaudete et Exultate of Pope Francis is, quote, "We are never completely ourselves unless we belong to a people. That is why no one is saved alone, as an isolated individual. Rather, God draws us to himself, taking into account the complex fabric of interpersonal relationships present in a human community. God wanted to enter into the life and history of a people. Relationships require risk and an active participation, especially if we want to have Jesus in the midst. It is not a done deal because we are part of the Popolare movement. From these statements, what ideas or experiences can we offer each other in the breakout groups where we ask ourselves or we talk about we belong to a people, no one is saved alone, relationships require risk and action, and fourthly, has lockdown made a difference to our or your relationships?
Marie, you had a question as you raised your hand.
Yeah. You talked about these one-sided relationships that if we persevere in loving, God will be there. And I mean, some relationships are not one way; they are reciprocal, but some are not. And just wondering, how to best live those relationships with grace, with love.
But just to say about that kind of relationship that you're talking about, I think that somehow all of us are involved in those kind of relationships. I think it's specifically Christian because I had a very loving family, but there were situations where which were difficult, and because my father wasn't, was really my father, because he was not a Christian, he just cut the relationship. And I think that it is specifically Christian that we constantly start again and restart again and restart again. And also that's what Kara taught us. Kara asked us to constantly restart no matter what. And I think, that is what makes us who we are, and what makes us Christian is because we never give up on anyone, even though it's incredibly difficult. There's a lady who's having a huge amount of difficulty with her daughter-in-law. And the experience that she tells us is just so, they're edifying. They are saintly experiences because she, as a Christian, takes it on and carries it ahead. It's amazing. It's a beautiful thing.
Then there was
Thank you.
Lyndon. He was asking what the word transitivity means. And after Lyndon, Tonette had a question.
Well, also, I think that word transitivity is also something that's specifically Christian. Although I think other people do it as well, but I think it's specifically Christian in the sense that it's that when you have a wonderful relationship with somebody else, you're prepared to open it up to others. So if we have a wonderful experience of Jesus in the midst, that's what I can remember my first experience in Mariapolis. Mariapolis is specifically about transitivity because it is the experience of people who are constantly generating the presence of Jesus, and because they are generating the presence of Jesus, they're also open to other people who are coming in from outside. And then people from outside, in my case, I came into a Mariapolis, I knew nothing, and I was just bowled over by this presence. That's transitivity.
Yeah, Antoinette?
I just want to better understand the concept of multiplicity in relation to unity.
Well, there was the two aspects. The aspects of a lot of input. So that experience that I told you of that, the word of life in Kapiti, there's a lot of input there because there are people with a lot of experience of life. And so when they come to a word of life group, they bring with them this huge amount of experience. And so that's why I can say that of all the words of life that I've been to, in a certain sense, that's the one that's got the greatest sense of well, depth, let's say, in a way, because they're people who have got a huge amount of experience of life, and so when they speak, you know that there's a depth there. So that's multiplicity. There are a lot of input of, although you can't actually see it or feel it, although you can feel it because you feel that there's a lot of, those people who are coming are bringing a wealth of experience. So that's multiplicity. But then there's multiplicity when certainly there's a motivation of love on one side, but then a complication of relationship. In other words, there's maybe a misunderstandings. We're all different, so each one of us brings into a relationship all sorts of stuff that I think it's especially true that multiplicity that we're talking about now, the one where there's negativity, is when people live together. Because when people live together, then we really get to know each other. And so there's a lot of, let's say, different levels of misunderstanding or envy or irritation or whatever you like to call it. But let's say the most important thing is a motivational thing. And the motivational thing about multiplicity is that the greatest motivation in this multiplicity is the one of love. If that's the greatest motivation, if that is the motivation, even though there are all these other things, then if we do what Kara used to always say, if there's something negative or there's something that we feel that we don't understand, then use that negativity as a springboard to make a greater act of love. Kara said, that was one of the most beautiful things. Kara had a lot of sayings that we all love very much, but one of the ones that I really loved was, she said, if there's something that's not right, use it as a springboard to love even more. So, that's another type of multiplicity. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone who came and everyone who contributed. Especially thank you to Ian for preparing this presentation, which wasn't an easy topic, but I think it was worthwhile. And also thank you to Bingo and Annette and David for their experiences. Now, the next UPM is going to be on Wednesday, the 16th of September, in a month's time. And it's going to be presented by Karim Barbara from Sydney, and it's going to be on the culture of resurrection. So be intrigued and see what that means on the 16th of September. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening, and see you next time.
Thank you, Jana.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.